Yo, 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 what's up, y'all? This is your boy Big Mike in the building. Welcome again into Swish for Real. I got my buddy in the building, my co-host Bob. What's up with you, man?
I'm doing just fine.
Man, how's your week, man? How's things going on your end of the world?
It's a blessed. If you wake up breathing and can praise the Lord, it's a blessed week. So, I've had a really good week and stayed warm. So it's all good.
Man, it's been freaking cold for real, man. I got to get my air ducts clean because we have an older house, so I got to get these air ducts clean so the air just don't flow through well. But hey, I'm probably saying too much, but anyway. And another guy we are glad to have back on the podcast. He joined us a couple of weeks ago, maybe several weeks ago. Earl K. Sneed, salute to your brother. How you doing, man?
So, brothers, I'm doing well. I'm trying to stay warm. I'm not built for this. I am a tropical brother. Like I like to go on vacation. Boogie Bob knows. I went to Oklahoma. It gets really, really cold. It gets colder
Mm,
than it does in Texas. But I'm not built for this.
no,
I'm ready
thanks.
for the springtime.
How's your week so far, man? What's been going on your world, man? You're on the little planet.
Everything has been going very, very well. I've got some news I'm gonna break pretty soon. Not official yet, but let me just say to stay tuned. I've got some really good stuff coming.
And guys, if you have not subscribed to him on X, check him out, man. He be really doing his thing, man. We
Appreciate
appreciate
it.
what you do out there, and whatever we can do to support you, man. We'll definitely chime in and help you out as much as we can. But all
Appreciate it.
right, man. So today's topic, man, our first topic, we're going to talk about NBA players, man, who have great endorsement deals. And what are the benefits of having an endorsement deal? Is it a good or bad? You know what I mean? A lot of them, could be shoe deals. It could be a lot of things, but we're going to talk about shoes. And a couple of people I have in mind. And the first, we're going to jump it off to you, Earl. We're going to talk about some endorsements that maybe LaMelo and some that Kobe had and Caitlin Clark, how she's doing. What are your thoughts on endorsement deals and how do they benefit players if they get them? And then, like when you're a rookie, does it benefit you to have a deal beforehand? Because we have the NIL now, but kind of
Right.
give us your thoughts on what brand deals do for basketball players,
I,
particularly LaMelo, Kobe, and Caitlin.
I think it gives you exposure to the world on a global stage, especially if you're in a small market. You mentioned Caitlin Clark. She's in Indiana. She was in Iowa before that. But her name is bigger than where she plays. And I think her partnership with the endorsement deal that she signed with Nike gives her that global appeal also. You mentioned before a player even comes into the league, LeBron signed for $90 million with Nike before he came into the league. Um, you mentioned Kobe. Um, when Kobe was first leaving Adidas and he was testing out different shoes, he needed to know where he was going to sign at. And now he has postpartum, he has a lifetime deal with Nike, where
Mm-hmm.
Vanessa is doing a great job to keep that brand alive with the
Mm-hmm.
Mamba brand. I think endorsement deals open up your name and your exposure, but also it brings in a lot of money away from what you're doing on the court. But also it gives you a platform to affect the world on a global stage.
No, thanks. And a couple of players who have lifetime deals. LeBron James tops the list. He has a lifetime deal with Nike. Kevin Durant has a lifetime deal with Nike as well. And Steph Curry has a lifetime deal with Under Armour.
Right.
And not to mention,
And a partnership because he has the Curry brand Under
Mhm.
Armour, which they're going to build up like the Jordan brand did with Nike, And I see Steph being able to do that. Now he has De'Aaron Fox signed underneath him. So I feel like
Mm,
the Curry brand is going to be so much bigger once Steph is done playing.
you think it could eclipse Jordan Brand? I doubt it, but
No,
it's Jordan is like a phenomenon.
right, right. When
And
they're still wearing your shoes, uh, what is this? Like 30 years after you're done playing, and a lot of the young folks that are wearing Jordans never saw the man play. So I feel like that brand will never be eclipsed, and he's worth $3.5 billion. So I don't think Steph will ever be in that rarefied air against his airness. But I feel like he's headed in the right direction.
Now James Harden has a deal with Adidas, and you think Adidas is? I mean, because I remember Adidas as a youngster, coming up in the '80s with Run DMC wearing those shell toes Adidas and all that stuff. So that's why I remember Adidas. But can he, as far as James Harden, make that brand a prominent brand with his stature, his NBA prowess? What do you think about that?
I don't think so. I don't just and James Harden he has his own wine away from the court. He's going to be a serial entrepreneur whenever he's done playing. But I don't think he's big enough to carry that brand. If you know
Mm,
what I'm saying, I feel like Damian Lillard is a bigger name. He's more box office. I feel like in terms of the Adidas brand. Um, but I feel like when I think about James Harden, I don't necessarily think Adidas first. I think
mhm.
about his beard. uh, so like I think Adidas and I think about Dame time whenever I think Damian Lillard.
And what about Kyrie Irving with Anta? That's a new brand
That's a good
that's
one.
coming out, and they also signed Clay Thompson to Anta. So
Right.
those two, even though they're in the twilight of their career almost, you think they can make that brand a household name? Well, they trying to, especially with Kyrie, but Kyrie's name was not as big as it was when he was with Cleveland. But
Right.
do you think Anta can make a headway in this industry in regards to endorsement deals?
I think that they can attempt to, and with uh, Kyrie, he signed a deal where I think he's the creative director. So it's
Mm,
not just he's wearing these shoes, he's also got creative control over the Anta basketball brand.
mhm.
And I think that's a great deal for him personally. I just don't feel like the brand is going to be big enough, but it's probably bigger overseas than it is in the United States.
Yeah, and I can agree with that. Especially with those shoes he has with the tassels on the end of them. That was
Right.
an interesting shoe. And
Right.
he's
That was
actually given, yeah, he's given homage to the
right.
indigenous people here in the United States. So I get it, you know what I mean? Because my grandma was indigenous, so it makes a lot of sense to me to kind of give back.
Right.
Bob,
That's
your
all.
thoughts on endorsement deals, man, when it comes to NBA shoes? And again, we're talking about the particular people with Kobe, Catlin, and so forth.
Well, this is Wild Dog's area. This is not necessarily my forte. I'm so old. You got three choices for shoes when you went to PE. You either had Converse if you had money, you had Kicks if you had a little bit, and then you had just your regular gym sneakers. And you were lucky if the laces lasted the whole semester. So I didn't I didn't really grow up with shoes. Like I was already out of college when Jordan entered the NBA. So that's Wild Dog's forte. But I will say this: uh, we're talking before the program about 30 for 30, and there's one about Sonny Vaccaro.
Right.
And
Mhm.
you know, basketball teams before NIL, uh, coach would get some fancy player, and Nike would recruit by giving the whole team shoes because it was illegal for the players to accept shoes. So, Wayne Tisdale came to OU, and all of a sudden, they had some nice shoes. Uh, Earl will know about Wayman Tisdale and OU.
Yeah.
Uh, but they when I think about shoes and a shoe brand, I can't help but think about Spike Lee. Money, it's got to be the shoes.
That'd be the
No,
shoe.
Morris, it's not the
That'd be
shoes.
the shoe.
Money, it's got to be the shoes. No, Morris, it's not the shoes. And that's an iconic commercial, even for non-basketball heads. They talk about that. I will say this: the not being a shoe head, uh, brand concentration seems to have disappeared. You had the three main players, and when Nike took over, So now you've got more than one or two brands, and seems that loyalty has disappeared along with it. So it's like you got so many brands. Like I don't know what the price are. I remember when someone said they bought 100 pair of Jordans, and I'm like, what? I'm like, I don't even have a suit that costs $100, let alone a pair of shoes. Kids were, instead of robbing them, they were knocking them down and stealing their shoes so they could sell their shoes not that long ago.
Nah,
Uh,
facts. That was a hard time back then. I remember those days. That was back in the 90s when they was really knocking kids in the head and taking Jordans.
yeah. So, I mean, I have no idea but it seems to me that there's so many brands, and so even in the Air Jordans, there's so many different styles of Air Jordans. There's you'd have to win the lotto and be a millionaire parent to keep up with all the different shoes, at least from my perspective, and the loyalty. Uh, and that kind of gets in. There's too many options for sneakers
Mm,
and shoes now. You know, I when I finally got out of college, I bought a pair of Reebok, and I thought I was hit. And the Reebok Classics were not cheap, but they were cheap compared to Air Jordans.
Mm.
Uh, and then I mean, everything's kind of got this way, but the the money for the shoe contracts is just got outrageous. Like Earl was saying, when a player makes more from the money from the shoes than they do from playing basketball, I'm like, whoa, okay, something's upside down here. Like you were talking about Steph Curry not eclipsing MJ, but if they had a basketball with a Curry brand basketball, I mean, you got Wilson and you know, uh, you everybody wants to shoot a 3-pointer because of Stephen Curry. So I mean, if
right.
you branding with a basketball, I could see that expanding. But I'm just not a shoe head, so that's my 2 cents worth.
Now, facts. It just kind of reminds me because I grew up kind of like in a bad neighborhood, poor neighborhood, and my mom, she couldn't afford to get us all shoes, and I ended up wearing when I was probably like 13 the Walmart specials, the XJ 9000s, and those like was the most horrible shoes you can buy, and they were hard on your feet. So when I got old enough to get a job, man, I was like, no, I'm not ever wearing XJ 9000s again. So I got out of that one though. But yeah, I enjoy what the brand deals do for a lot of these youngsters because the NIL deals was really making a headway and they're giving you the opportunity to actually make money while you're in college and in high school just because of brand deals. And it's not just even for sneakers. There's like restaurants that give kids brand deals, clothing lines that give brand
Car
deals.
dealerships.
Right. So it's so many options for these kids to get endorsement deals, not just only with just the top three shoe companies, but there's so many things now that these kids can get opportunity to make money. And I think that's been a good thing as far as kids that struggle
Right.
and when they're financially not strapped. And that's just a societal thing where kids are financially strapped. But NIL has made a difference in a lot of kids' life, and you have to be athletically talented to actually pull off a lot of these deals. So, and speaking about
Mike,
athletically
I got
talented,
a question there for you because your favorite player, Chris Webber.
oh yeah,
What would the Fab Five and their fashion statement? What would they be able to get with NIL money now? They made
oh
famous
my
the Bronx,
God,
and
just think
did
about
they have their own sneakers?
no, what they did do, they did have some Nikes that they wore, but that wasn't their brand. They didn't
I
brand it
like
for the.
black or Air Force Ones with black socks.
Yeah, they wore. That's what I was about to say. They
Yeah.
brought in the black socks era, and that's
Yeah.
when everybody would start wearing black
And the
socks
baggy shorts.
And the
and the
baggy,
baggy shorts.
yeah, I said the track shorts, the ones that hung down to your knees.
Right.
Right, and when I first seen that, I was like, "That is dope," and they were all freshmen.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Nah, I'm gonna get me a Michigan this, Michigan that." Everybody was wearing Michigan stuff, man. It was like
Right.
they just brought an era of a new way of looking at how to dress as far as athletics
Right.
go, especially basketball, and I was all for it. And then when they played, it was so phenomenal. I'm like, "Oh man!" And like you said, by Chris Webber, my favorite player, and I watched him play. And ever since I watched him play, man, I was like, yo, I'm a fan of his. I don't care where he goes.
Can you
I'm always
imagine if in today's society, if that were to happen now, uh, what that kind of fashion statement and marketing and that, what those guys, Jimmy King included, would be able to make today?
I
Whew.
I think they had the same cultural impact as Allen Iverson. They
Mm-hmm.
were the hip hop brand for a basketball team that Allen Iverson was off of the court and even when he played. And I think they all brought hip hop culture to the basketball court. So
Yeah.
I feel like they would be super, super popular now. But I would say that now that the NCAA is trying to collect money in some way off of these NIL deals, I think you're going to see that kind of policed a lot more than we've seen in the last 2 seasons.
No, thanks. I think the way they brought that culture to the forefront, especially when you mentioned Allen Iverson, it was because of him that players had to wear suits for a little bit
Let's
of a
go.
time.
Yeah, yeah. David Stern did not like that.
Hey, heck, nah. He was
He
like
said you have to wear a sports coat or a
something.
collared shirt. Yeah,
He changed it up though.
yes, he did.
But speaking of changing it up, and Bob, we're gonna continue with you. Um, Luka Doncic, even though it's been, I think, in my opinion, the trade brought a lot of eyes on the NBA, and now they're just talking about this trade in particular, and it's not been beneficial for the Mavs just yet. I'm not saying that we are out of the hunt as far as NBA championship, but will Luka ever become a Mav again? If so, what would be the circumstances for him coming back to the Dallas Mavericks?
There's an old saying, I think it was Winston Churchill or somebody out of World War II said, you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it. And, Jason Kidd was pretty young when he got traded and then took the Nets uh, to the finals twice
Mhm.
and then came back later in his career. And now he's the coach.
Mm. Yep.
It's a good point. Really good point.
This is my bold prediction. In the summer 20, you hear it here first, guys. You hear it here first. And we're getting it on recording. In the summer of 2026, Luka Doncic will opt out and sign with Denver to play with Nikolai Jokic.
Okay.
That's my bold prediction.
So
He
he
can't
has
get the
no.
next contract. He can sign a series. He can sign an extension, which not as much, but he can do the 1+1 or the 3
Right,
year like LeBron. And
right.
he grew up as a kid idolizing LeBron.
Or the player
He
option
loves,
for the second year.
yeah, he loves the Joker. So if he can't get more money, he's going to go play with his friend from Serbia.
And let me ask you this question though, Bob, and it's been kind of circulating around in the social media streets. One of the reasons why is that they wanted to trade Lucas because of the contract, which was $350 million. Do you think that had a big bearing on them deciding to trade him or no?
I, I I definitely think it's one of the factors. They didn't want to pay the money. They traded they traded Tim Hardaway Jr. to get Quentin Grimes, and then they gave Quentin Grimes away because he was a free agent this summer. They didn't want to pay him. And oh,
Mm,
by the way, Kyrie can opt out, and Kyrie's going to be 40 plus million a year, uh, 200, 300. He now qualifies for one of those. I don't think it's a super max, but it's up
No, it's
there in the
not.
max contract range.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's being ran by corporate America. It's not being ran by a sports fan anymore.
mm,
I think that definitely had a bearing. I, I think there's a couple things that maybe they were looking at. There's a lot that we won't know for years, but I think they looked at what the ceiling was for a Luka Doncic team, and that maybe it's 50 to 55 wins, and they didn't see them getting over that hump. So they kind of swung for the fences. They saw, they've seen James Harden has a very similar game. Houston and several other teams put players around him and couldn't quite get over the hump. So he's somewhere between Harden and LeBron. But even with LeBron's teams that went to the finals, you had to have special players around him to get to the finals. So I think that played a factor along with the money. Uh, we'll never know the true injury, but he's played 2 games and he's now on the injured list for the Lakers as of today.
With the
Uh,
calf injury, the same calf strain injury. Yeah.
when they said they basically said it's maintenance, but I think there's more to that calf injury than they're saying. Uh, I think late in his career, he may come back for an encore tour because for a retirement year because Dallas meant that much to him uh,
Mm-hmm.
on the way out. Uh, but I'll leave with this fact. Remember, Luka played in Europe against grown men at the age of 13, I think it
That's
was.
it. Yeah.
So his chronological age is 25, and he's in his 7th season. But he played 4 or 5 years in Europe. So his body is more like a 29 or 30-year-old when it comes to how much he
Mm.
got beat up and hit. And even before he got injured with the Mavericks, you noticed, forget weight. Uh, he wasn't going to the rim near as much this year. Even last year on the way to the finals, he was relying on the fadeaway, turnaround,
That's
up
right.
and under. He wasn't getting the layups like he was when he was a rookie or even a sophomore year. Uh, so I, I think one player said Luka at 300 pounds is still better than half the NBA.
Anthony Edwards said that.
Stop him.
Yeah.
Uh, we had a guy named Oliver Miller many, many years ago that was kind of like that. That was super athletic.
Yep.
Uh, so you look at the numbers. Luka and LeBron on the same team. By the way, LeBron had 40 points last night
The second
at the
time.
age of 40 twice. Never been done
Second
in
time.
history. Twice he scored 40. So uh, I Luka's basketball body is older than the age that he is. That's my point.
Mm.
Uh, I think you'll see him come back to Dallas only on a farewell tour to give the Mavs fans some love and say, hey, I never wanted to leave, but I'm going to finish my career here.
Makes sense. Earl, you think he'll be back with Dallas eventually in the future?
No. Never. I do not see that happening ever. You cost that man $117 million by making him ineligible for the Supermax.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. And then the smear campaign kind of came out after that. I don't see him. He seemed like he was in shock when the trade first happened. Probably the first week, 10 days. I think he was seriously hurt by that. I don't think that ever goes away. I think we've all gone through bad breakups, and you go through a bad breakup, and it's like no matter how much you want to forgive the other person, something happened to where you're like, I'll never look at that person the same. And
No,
I feel like
thanks.
for Luka, that's how he now looks at the Dallas Mavericks organization, not just Nico Harrison. I think that's how he looks at the organization now because no one overrode Nico Harrison and said, no, we're not trading this generational talent at 25 years old. So I don't see that ever happening. I did like Bob's point about Jason Kidd coming back later in his career and winning a championship. And I will say, if Mark Cuban was still the owner of the Mavericks, maybe that would be possible because Mark Cuban traded Devin Harris for Jason Kidd, and then brought Devin Harris back and said, I will never trade Devin Harris again, and then traded Devin Harris again. And now, and I was there the day that
Devin
Devin Harris
Harris was really young when he traded for Jason Kidd.
the
I didn't
first
like
time,
that trade then.
but when he traded him to Denver, he was older.
Yeah, he was older. He lost his speed by then, but when he
Right.
went to the Nets, he was still young. He made the All-Star team that year.
Yeah, his first year in New Jersey at the time. Yes, but I was present when we were a shoot around in San Francisco, and Devin Harris was doing 3-point shooting like always with Dirk Nowitzki in San Francisco, and they're clowning around, and we're finding out on our phones that he's just been traded to Denver, and
Mm,
it's done shooting threes with Dirk, and he goes back and checks his phone, and he just dropped his head, and he's in
dang.
tears because he has to meet with the media after that. We're at shoot around, away from his daughters who were in school, his wife at the time. Like I saw the emotional hurt, and I will say Devin Harris is a really big person to come back and now work as a broadcaster for the organization.
And
After being played
he's
apart.
now on the broadcast with Mark Folwell
Right.
and does a really good job.
Does a great job. Great
In
job.
some ways,
Um,
better than Derek Harper. And I love Derek Harper.
Harper's my guy. I love both of them. I'm not going to say that. But
Yeah.
I will say for him to come back, he has to be a really good, big person. Now, I don't know Luka that great. I'm just saying there was a lot of things that were said after trading him, and the fact that they traded him without him knowing, and he's your franchise guy. I just
Hmm.
feel like that's the type of hurt you don't just get over, and it might take a lifetime to get over. So
No.
I don't see him coming back.
And
Let me
and
ask you this
the
question.
kid didn't come back on his own. It was a trade, you
Right,
know. So
without
it,
his control.
new owners, new management.
Right,
No, there's a possibility that he comes back that way. But I will say this: if if Cuban, who said he'd rather divorce his wife than trade Luca,
right.
he could have made that a condition of selling the team to those people.
He could have, but it's something you don't think about maybe with this 25-year-old generational talent that's made first team All NBA 5 years already at 25. Like maybe you think this organization is never going to fire, never going to trade this generational talent.
He could
Let
have
me
made
go ahead
it a
and sell this
but
team
Cuban
for
could have made it a contract
$300 billion or whatever.
stipulation when he sold the team because the NBA rules, Luka didn't qualify for no trade.
Right,
But Cuban, if he really wanted to have taken care of it, could have put it in the contract of sale, like guaranteeing that Luka ownership couldn't trade him.
yeah,
Uh, there's other than what I mentioned earlier about maybe the ceiling. I think I think the other thing, and this goes, we've talked about organizations for a long time. We just never talked against the Mavs organization. But, Luka got to the point to where he's like, I want this guy, I want that guy. And, they lost Casey Smith, his physical trainer, and then look at the injuries they've got. They traded Boban, they traded Dorian Finney Smith, and they were sending signal after signal to the
right,
signaler, we're in charge, not you.
right,
And LeBron pretty much demanded when he's at Cleveland is like, I'm running a team, and there's rumors for years about coaches being fired because LeBron didn't like them or changes in GM and all that. And LeBron had that kind of pull. And I think to some degree, maybe organization, they looked at it from how dare the person who works for us tell us what we can and can't do. And that's not been said or publicly put out there.
right,
Uh, but yeah, it'd be like the one of the three of us telling our boss is like, no, you need to do this because I'm the superstar and you're just the boss.
right.
And then going to the owner and acting like, hey, I'm in charge, not you.
It,
And
it definitely it definitely showed that the front office is in charge of a league that's been dominated by the players. It was the first time I felt like when the front office took control back. Because,
And I
like you
said that
mentioned,
last week.
LeBron,
I said for the first time, all the players are running scared because the players have been in
right,
control. They signed a big contract and then they go, "I want to be traded." You can name several, at least a
right,
handful. Harden
right,
was the one that comes to mind. Like they signed a big money, the max extension, and halfway through the season, trade me, trade me, trade me, trade me. I want the big money, but then trade me.
Hmm.
And So, in one fell swoop, ownership said, player Anthony Edwards said, "What, Luka? Luka got traded?" He said, "I'm scared." He goes, "If Luka can be traded, anybody can be traded."
Anybody, anyone can.
Earl, I got a question for you though. When that trade went down, where were you, one, and what were your thoughts when you seen this all happen? Because I know it happened almost like late evening.
Yeah, yeah. My son's birthday is 11/24. It's November 24th. I think the trade went down at 11/22. I pray for my son twice a day at 11/24. So when my phone starts going off and I'm getting alerts, I'm thinking that my alarm is going off because it's time for me to pray for my son. I was in the middle of ironing my clothes to go to church the next day. It was a Saturday night. Um, and then I got the update from an ESPN update, I think, and I got on X Twitter and I saw the tweet from Shams.
Hmm.
I'm like, this has to be a hack. And he came back. He tweeted the news, and then the follow up tweet was, "This is real. Like this is happening. Everyone thinks I'm hacked. I'm telling you, this is a real trade." Um, and I couldn't sleep that night. I wanted to see everyone's reaction then because my first thoughts was this is the worst trade in NBA history. And
Mm,
but then I thought about it, and if the Mavericks win in the next 2 to 3 years, it's a great trade because the only thing that this Mavericks team is missing is a defensive anchor, and you get
mm,
that with Anthony Davis. And I kind of compared it to uh, Coach Day at Ohio State. When Ohio State lost to Michigan, everyone wanted to run. Everyone wanted to fire Ryan Day at Ohio State and Columbus. Everyone wanted to fire him, and the only thing he could do to save his job was win the national championship. And his team rallied behind him, and they won the national championship. So I will say even though fans have turned their backs on Nico Harrison and the Mavericks, if the Mavericks win a championship in the next 2 to 3 years, that's the only thing that saves the trade, in my opinion. If you're the Lakers, you bring in a generational talent at 25 years old that you can hand the reins over to whenever LeBron steps away. So I think they've got a longer window to kind of be judged on this trade. But I think that the Mavericks have to win in the next 2 to 3 years. And you see that with Anthony Davis's contract. I think if Kyrie re-signs with the Mavericks, it's going to match Anthony Davis's contract because their window is the next 2 to 3 years.
so let me ask you this question as well. Do you think they will put the right people around Luka in LA? Because I'm pretty sure they're going to try their best. But if they put the right people around him, will they win a championship before Dallas does?
Um, that is the question because I feel like the only thing they're missing for sure is a center, and they made the trade to bring in a center with Charlotte. They made the trade and then rescinded the trade. So I don't think they're going to be judged until they get a center. And I think that's what their main focus is going to be. One, getting Luka to sign an extension, but two, getting a big man that's a lob threat to play with Luka this offseason. So I feel like as long as they get a center and try to maximize whatever is left with LeBron, and he doesn't look like he's slowing down, like you just mentioned, LeBron just had 40 at 40 years old for a second time. So I'm not going to close the window on that guy, definitely. But you got Luca in the about to hit his prime. He's not even in his prime yet. If they can get a center who can finish above the rim and block some shots, I think like that team is right there on the cusp of winning the championship.
Yeah, because they got Anthony
Earl,
Davis playing his natural position with the
Yeah.
power forward position, which he always wanted to play in general when he came
Oh,
out of Charlotte, as far as him being going from Charlotte to LA. I think that position
New
suits him
Orleans.
well.
Yeah.
and Earl, there was actually published on Facebook and ESPN about the rescinding. it was Luka that demanded the Lakers go get Mark Williams.
Right.
So that's what made my point earlier that Luka's already demanding. Don't be surprised if LeBron doesn't pull a Magic Johnson and play center for him.
You can do that, but not for so long because Oklahoma City is big. Denver with Jokic is big. At some point in the playoffs, you have to put a actual center out there, and they signed Alex Lynn and they have Jackson Hayes, but you need a true starting center in the NBA, and I
Like a
think
Derek
that's
Lively.
like a Derek Lively would be perfect for that team.
Oh man.
And he's young and he can grow with Luka. They and I thought Mark Williams was the perfect guy because of his age. What is he, 23? I thought he would have been perfect, but I don't know why they rescinded the trade. I don't know what in his physical they found, but I think they're going to focus at least on getting a center this offseason.
Yeah, there could be a buyout like a Clint Capella or something coming along in the next week or two that helps
Right.
them. Andre Drummond's been passed around,
Yeah.
serviceable.
I don't see Andre Drummond fitting in with that team, but I think Clint Capella could definitely fit in with that team.
Yeah, because he can run the floor for sure. And
Right.
speaking about running the floor, there's a lot of talk about what's ruining the NBA. And we're going to jump back to you, Earl. Do you think the 3-point shot has ruined the current NBA landscape and just kind of make everybody want to shoot threes and nobody? Because there's really no traditional centers anymore with
No.
3-point shot being introduced. What are your thoughts on that? Could it be that this particular shot has kind of tarnished the NBA a little bit?
Right. I will say when I see middle school players and elementary school guys pulling up from half court, uh, I thought okay, this is getting out of control. Everyone's trying to be Steph Curry. I didn't think that it ruined the NBA then, but then to see Boston shooting 63s a game or stuff like that, I
Mm,
feel like that's a little too much. I don't think I don't think positionless basketball is a problem. I don't think you necessarily have to have a traditional center in this league. I think you can play 5 man out and it spaces the floor, but I don't think you have to hoist up 63s a game at the same time. I feel like if you play like the old Phoenix Suns with Mark D'Antoni and that 7 seconds or less, uh, getting a good shot up, and he didn't like long twos, but he still wasn't shooting as many threes as they're shooting now. I think that they had a lot of transitional points, so you get a lot of fast break points. You might look for a three in half court, but a lot of times it was off for screens. It wasn't necessarily the first shot that you take. I thought that was great, but I do feel like we're not playing basketball. I think who was it, Draymond Green that called it accidental basketball. Like you might luck up and get a good shot out of it. I feel like no one's moving the ball anymore. If you have ball movement that leads to a three, that's totally different than
yeah.
just hoisting up the first shot that becomes available because it's a three.
So let me ask you this question though. When you look back at the 2011 Mavericks and they played the Lakers on that closeout game, they set a record for 3-point shooting.
Yeah,
So that
23.
would kind of give you an idea that at that point in time, 3-point shooting was good. What were your thoughts when you was watching that game?
It was uh, the perfect storm, I would say. I think Jason Terry had 6 threes in that game. I think Peja had 9. Was it
10.
Peja had
He
9, yeah.
was shooting for 11, but he had
Right.
10 and Peja had 9.
Yeah, it was the perfect storm and uh the Lakers
And
looked
Peja
like
Brea hit a few too.
right. And the Lakers had no defense for it. And then we saw Andrew Bynum throw that forearm shiver to JJ Barea coming down the lane.
Oh, that was
I
horrible.
thought that was actually beautiful basketball because there was ball movement that led to
Yeah,
the threes. They weren't just hoisting up threes to shoot. And multiple players were in the zone. They were all on fire. Everyone was shooting heat checks, but all of the heat checks were going in. So I didn't have a problem with that. But I feel like now guys are not hot; they're just shooting threes. I think in Luka's last game, he was 1 of 9 from 3-point range.
Yeah,
Like
for the
at
Lakers.
some point, at some point, maybe when you're 1 of 5, you say it's not my night. I'm not going to shoot this. I'm going to step inside, maybe shoot a fadeaway 2, maybe post up. But I feel like when you're not realizing that you're not knocking down the 3, maybe I need to pass it, or maybe I need to take a more efficient shot. And I feel like players aren't doing that right now, and it's kind of ruining the game for the casual fan. But in saying that, Bob, uh, when baseball had the home run, the juice ball, they would always say, "Chicks dig the long ball." You know, as long as they were uh, knocking out home runs, everyone loved it. You know, but then it became a problem once pitchers were not as efficient. They weren't being as efficient as pitchers and meeting the needs of what their contracts kind of call for them to do. So I feel like at some point there's going to be an adjustment in the NBA. I don't know what leads to it, but I would like to see the 3-point shot stay, but teams kind of work harder to get the 3-point shot and move the ball a lot more.
Yeah, because when they just hoisted up, like you said, 60 shots for the 3 point, come
It's
on,
ridiculous.
that's crazy. And it kind of reminds me when I really start getting really into like high school basketball, and I watched a lot of. I used to coach AAU, so I understand it. So when I looked at what the ball boys were doing, they was hoisting up threes, but they play very good defense, and those 3 kids playing together made the game look phenomenal, and their
Right,
dad was just coaching them and making sure that they played a right way. But still, when you look at LaMelo in high
right,
school pointing down at the floor, I'm going to shoot
right.
him right here,
He
and now
was
you got
telling them.
kids doing kids doing it now, man. It's just crazy. I think it started from like high school. I mean, like
Yeah,
you mentioned middle school. It probably started there for a lot of good players, but when you get to high school and you're doing AAU, it's no it's like the Wild Wild West if you really think
right.
about it. So these kids are just jacking like it ain't nothing, man. Bob, your thoughts on it, man? Do you think the 3-point shot has ruined the NBA? And if so, how can it be corrected?
Uh, First of all, Earl made a lot of good points there, and I agree with a lot of that. You go back to some of the old-fashioned coaches that uh, you may even remember Chicago Bulls. Stacey King took a three-pointer, and Phil Jackson pulled him. And coaches would say there's a bad shot, a good shot, a better shot, and a great shot. And a bad shot is you just hoist it up, and a, a good shot is you made one pass. A great shot's two passes, three passes. It's a great shot. And Avery, when he was coaching Mavericks, he said when we swing the ball from side to side, he goes, we're pretty good. He goes, but when we make at least two passes, we're unstoppable.
Right.
And uh, so I think it's both. It's good and bad. Earl made a lot of good points. Uh, but to me, there is such a thing as a bad 3-point shot. When it comes in the rhythm of the game, like the 2011 championship team, or even the 1986 Boston Celtics, when it comes in the flow and the rhythm of the game, and it's generated, and there's nobody within 10 feet or even flying at the shooter, that's a practice shot. Uh, what Draymond Green was alluding to is it's basically became a game of horse and playground basketball. Uh, and that's kind of what. So one of the things I will say, Houston was a 3-year layup when. Hold on a minute. Spam
Interruption.
call. Uh, Mike D'Antoni, when he was there, the Phoenix coach that Earl K. Sneed was also talking about, when he would have Harden and Houston, he said a layup or 3-pointer. And they had a lot of mid-range shooters.
Right.
But they were one of the first teams to average 40, 45 3-point shots a game. And it was like one team. And now you've got multiple teams where in a typical NBA game, you got 90 shots, 90 possessions, maybe 100 if you have some turnovers. But if you look at the statistics, uh, almost half of the NBA, 45 to 50 3-point attempts a game. So they're half of their shots are 3-point shots. And it's not from ball movement. I remember when Vince Carter come in, the first thing to do, they throw in the ball, he go to his sweet spot and he jack it up. He didn't even look for a pass. And I love Vince Carter, but it's kind of like pass the ball around. Uh, the teams, the other thing I had was not every 3-point shot is a good shot. They focus on the corner three, the top of the key, but not every 3-point shot is good. They used to disdain the fadeaway. And then people like Adrian Dantley and Mark McGuire and others, they perfected it and then Dirk even took it to another level where you couldn't even get to a fadeaway. It was always go to the rim, go towards the rim. You don't fade away. Well, the step back three is basically an enhanced on steroids version of a fadeaway. Uh, and that's not necessarily a good 3-point shot, even though a lot of the players have got adept at shooting it. It doesn't mean it's a good or great shot. Uh, but I want to touch on one point Earl made is uh, it's all but eliminated the great passing in the game that makes it such an art form. And that DeMar DeRozan, bless his heart, still has a mid-range game. And PJ's kind of got a little bit of that for the Mavericks, but the mid-range game works if the ball's moving. But if they used to call about the ball, Carmelo Anthony is a good example. The ball would stick. AI, the ball would stick. And they were referencing that the ball wasn't passing, and you got ball dominant point guards now, and that's what why SGA looks so great is like he'll either get to the rim, he'll take a wide open three, but other times he's passing the ball. Uh,
Yeah.
and Luka almost averaged a 30-point triple double last year. But if you really go back and look at it, he's highlight reel passes, passes that other people can't make, threading the needle through people between the legs. It's ESPN highlight reel. He threw a long range baseball pass to LeBron the other night. LeBron just catches it in stride, goes up and dunks it. Okay, but you only scored 12 points and you shot 1 for 9 from 3-point range. That's one. And ESPN's showing the dunk and the baseball pass. I'm like, okay, what about the other 10 possessions where you either turned it over, or you just heave the. You may like this term, Earl. Oklahoma Sooners way back when they called it the heave and hope. They throw the ball deep and hope that the receiver called it or a pass interference. And that's kind of the way. I mean, not every team's got a Stephen Curry or even a Tim Hardaway Jr. It's a heave and hope. But back to the original point, when you're more than 50% of your shots are 3-point shots, that tells me somebody's just walking up to their spot, taking a shot, and there's no passing. Like next time you watch, it doesn't matter what team you watch, count how many passes, because Avery made a good point. 2 passes, we get a good shot. 3 passes, we get a great shot.
Hockey assists.
No, thanks. And it reminds me of when I used to coach, when I started coaching Little League back in the day before I met Bob. I would always tell my players, and I didn't know anything about coaching at all. But one thing I knew, the fact of the matter is if you move the ball, you'll get a great shot. And now my logic to them, like, give me at least 3 passes. And if you get 3 passes in, somebody's going to be open because they're going to be chasing the ball, unless you have a great defensive team. But at that age, a lot of kids weren't playing great defense. They were just playing a lot of offense. So our offense passed the ball at least 3 times, and I guarantee you one of you guys will make a layup. And that's basically what happened. And we won a lot of games just by that theory. And as I got my career going as far as basketball goes. I got better, learned a lot of plays, learned a lot of stuff, and became a better coach. Let's go back to Luka, man.
And to add to that, Mike, when you and I were coaching, we had a drill called pass or dribble. And you have two guys and trying to have a guy try to catch the ball, and on the other side you had two guys dribbling, and you see who was quicker. And we always taught every one of our players a pass is quicker than a dribble, and it kind of comes from ice hockey. Uh, when I played ice hockey, that was skating, passing, and then shooting. That's what
Mm-hmm.
our hockey coach drilled into us because you get knocked off your skates, you're no good. If you can stay on your skates but you can't execute the pass, then there's no shot. So there's a lot of these coaches don't teach fundamentals like that. That a pass is faster than a dribble. But what did we see Luka in the 7 years here? Dribble it up, dribble it up. What was it? Harden set the record of like an average of 700 dribbles a game, something like that. It was ridiculous. In that same year, Klay Thompson averaged like 10 dribbles a game.
Yeah, 11.
11.
Yeah, that's crazy. So Earl, we're gonna swing it back to you, and I got a question for you. Since Luka has joined the Lakers, do you think? And I don't know what all they would need to make them have the ability to win the championship this year, and we're just focusing on just this year with him being there. What does the Lakers need to add as far as a team for them to win the title now?
I I really feel like the only thing they're missing is I'll say two things, but really one. They need a defensive anchor center because Anthony Davis cleaned up even before the Luka trade. Anthony Davis cleaned up a lot of their defensive uh, deficiencies. Um, he was the back line of the defense. He was the guy communicating. Austin Reeves is not a defender. At this point in LeBron's life and career, he is a step slower than a lot of the perimeter players that he guards. So you need a defensive anchor that can clean up a lot of those mistakes. And we all know Luka's not the best defender. So now you have Luka, Austin Reeves, and LeBron, and you need someone behind them. Jackson Hayes is not the best defender, backline defense. He's a great above the rim finisher, but he's not Anthony Davis. Alex Lynn is not that either. I feel like Jared Vanderbilt is the best defensive post player that they have, and he's undersized. Uh, so if they can get a defensive anchor in the buyout market, I feel like that will go a long way because LeBron's going to get his offensively. I feel like eventually, once Luka is comfortable in their system, he's going to get his offensively. We've seen Austin Reeves have big nights. He just had 45 a week ago or whatever. So offense is not their issue. I feel like it's going to be on the defensive end. But they've got to really scour the buyout market to get someone that can come in and contribute on the back line of the defense.
Yeah, because Dallas just picked up Moses Moody is his last name?
Brown.
Moses Brown. I think he's not bad because
and he's 7'2".
Yeah, 7'2", and we are sorely needing a center to come back. And I think if we were healthy, we'll be good. But as far as the Lakers go, I think you're right though. They definitely have some deficiencies. Three major players, and you mentioned all three of them: Luka, LeBron, and Reeves. None of them are known for their defensive prowess. So if they can probably change. Maybe still, if you only had two defenders in it, that's not. They got to be dogs. They got to be Steven. Right. What was the kid that played for Dallas at the time? He came off the bench. Steven.
Deshaun Stevenson.
Deshaun Stevenson, yeah. See, you got a guy like that who doesn't mind playing defense, and yeah, you can do that. But yeah, your bench got to be all defensive minded because you can run the score up a little bit, but then you got to reel that other team in. So I don't know what they'll do in regards to getting those.
They had a Caruso when they won the bubble championship,
Yeah.
and then let him go.
Yeah, and they also had Dwight Howard on that team. They had Rondo on that team. Their
Yeah,
bench was stacked on that team.
playoff Rondo.
Right, playoff Rondo. You're right. Yeah, but Dwight Howard was amazing coming off the bench in the bubble, and he could also play next to Anthony Davis. So they need a player equivalent to that, you know. And Dwight's about to go into the Hall of Fame, so he's not available, in my opinion. He
Mhm.
thinks he can still play. I don't think so.
And
But
Denver's not going to let DeAndre Jordan go either.
right, right.
Oh,
So uh, they've got to really scour the buyout market. And like you mentioned, Clint Capella, if he becomes available, I'm Rob Pelinka. He's the first call I make.
Nah, facts.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, Bob? What do the Lakers need to actually make the finals this year and win it all?
they need to punt. Uh, I'm glad you laughed at that, Earl. Uh, they they pretty much. I think Earl pretty much covered it. Rim protection and a lob threat. Uh, it's not quite Showtime Lakers 2.0, but that's how they're going to have to win. They're going to have to outscore people.
Right.
And uh, one of our follow-up questions, about the Mavs in the playoffs, but even without Luka, the Mavs this year had OKC's number. And you got Denver and whoever finishes 3 in the other bracket. So, if the Lakers can be in that 4 or 5 seed and Oklahoma City gets knocked off by somebody that's hot, then I think they could make the Western Conference Finals, but that's the ceiling. They don't, unless Joker gets hurt, and that's a big boy. Uh, but unless Joker gets hurt, I don't see him getting by that. And Earl, I just thought of a name that he's not great defensively, but boy, he sure would help them. Boban Marjanovic uh, is 7'4" and can score, and he's big, and he can handle the Joker. He's slow of foot, so he's not
He
really
could
that.
try to handle.
Yeah.
He
Well,
could
he's
try
big
to.
enough. He's big enough to the night he scored 31, had 20 some rebounds, double digit rebounds that night. They shut down the NBA and COVID. But my point is he's not a skinny 7'4". He's a hefty, big. He's not really that mobile, and he takes up a lot of space.
Yeah, the
Uh,
rebounds just fall into his hands.
yeah, as somebody that can lean on Joker for 20 minutes a game.
Yeah.
But if the seeding falls right, the Lakers could find themselves in the Western Conference Final against Denver. Uh, but I'll go with Earl. I like Denver to destroy him with Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon on the back side with the
Mhm.
Joker and Jamal Murray, and
Yeah.
they just picked up another person. Lakers don't have enough weapons to
They've got
stop them, and
Westbrook.
they can't. They wouldn't be able to outscore them.
Yeah, so their way of getting to the championship, it's the West has always been a juggernaut, a buzzsaw. It's just like you have to go through all these teams to even, and that was a surprise that Dallas lost to Boston the way they did in the finals, because how they went through the West, and everybody's thinking like, hey, Minnesota might put Dallas out, hey, Oklahoma might put Dallas out, but
Right.
still, the West is one of those divisions that you have to be one of the top tier teams regardless to even stay a foot. And when I look at the standings, I always compare like how many 20 games, like when you had 20 games or more, how many at this point in the season, how many teams in the West has 20 games and how many teams in the East has 20 games under their belt? And it's always the West have more teams that have 20 point 20 games under their belts as far as wins go. So the West has been absolutely a monster for many, many years. And I'm
Well,
thinking about
the Mavericks are 30-26, and they're sitting in the 8th place.
right. That tells you a lot about the West, man. The
I
West
mean, it wasn't that many years ago. I think it was Memphis or one of those teams. This was before the play-in tournament. They won 50 games and they missed the playoffs when the 8th seed got in automatically.
mm,
During the Dirk years,
Yeah,
if you won 50, you had a chance of not making the playoffs. You had to
right.
be in the mid 50s.
I remember that. I do remember that. And the Mavericks had to win in San Antonio to get the 50 wins. I remember that. Yeah.
thanks. And thinking of things to remember, this player we're going to talk about next was a Houston phenomenon, and his nickname was the Dream, and he had what they call the Dream Shake.
Dream
Like,
shake.
yeah, Earl, your thoughts on the legacy of Hakeem Olajuwon, man? I know you had an opportunity to watch him play, especially
Yeah.
in the Houston era. What are your thoughts when you watched him play, and what is his legacy for the city of Houston?
For me, I didn't think this until I talked to the great Eddie Sefko, who covered Hakeem and the Rockets before he came to Dallas. And I've always considered Dirk to be the greatest internationally born player in NBA history. And Eddie corrected me. He said, no, that's Hakeem. And I thought about it, and Hakeem could give you the same thing that Dirk could give you on offense, but Dirk couldn't give you the same thing on defense that Hakeem could. And
That is a fact.
93-94, Hakeem, first player in NBA history to win MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, and Finals MVP. Um,
Hey,
yeah, yeah. I think if you compare he and Dirk, both of them offensively had unguardable signature moves. Dirk had
yeah,
the one leg fadeaway. Hakeem had the Hakeem shake.
yeah, the Dream
If
Shake.
you see if you see their impacts on today's game, um, you see Embiid doing the dream shake. He went
Hmm.
and learned that from Hakeem in Houston. Kobe worked with Hakeem on his post game. So you saw that late in Kobe's career, him
Hmm.
having that post game. Everyone's shooting that one leg fadeaway now that Dirk popularized. Um, but I think what separates them, like I said, is the defensive side. Hakeem could lock you down, especially that back line. And those Houston teams, when Jordan retired for the next 2 years, Houston was running the NBA. They weren't able to do it once they got Charles Barkley, once they got Scottie Pippen. I wanted to see Charles get a championship. But 93, 94, that was Hakeem's time. So I would have liked to have seen Houston against Chicago then. But I will say for me, now, after talking to the great Eddie Sefko, I will say Hakeem is the greatest internationally born player in NBA history.
And I'm glad you mentioned Charles Barkley when he got onto the Houston Rockets team. And I was also rooting for him to win a championship. I was like, man, Barkley got to win one. He did all that in Philly and then went to Phoenix and then to Houston Rockets, and it still didn't do it for him. I just felt so bad for Barkley, but I guess it wasn't in his card. So the legacy for Hakeem Olajuwon, man, it's an amazing story to tell. And maybe I'm wrong, but isn't he from Nigeria?
Nigeria. Yeah. There's a great 30 for 30 documentary about when he came from Nigeria and he was going to go to, I think, St. John's or St. Joe's. And he got to New York and it was so cold. And he told them to get him out of there. And they flew him to Houston. And that's why he ended up going to U of H.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
even know that. I need to watch that 30 for
Yeah,
30.
I was watching it probably about a month ago, and it was really intriguing, but it was really good. And then they formed Phi Slamma Jamma with Clyde Drexler at U of H, but he was not originally supposed to go to U of H.
Dang, that is a story. I need to go watch that. Thanks for me give me something to watch over the weekend.
Yeah.
Bob, your thoughts, man, on the legacy of the great Hakeem Olajuwon. He left a little meat on the plate for you.
I'm gonna eat a lot. I'm gonna eat a lot here because I went to the University of Oklahoma from 1977 to 1984. Billy Tubbs was our coach. I got to see Wayman Tisdale play his freshman sophomore year, and then I actually got to see him after I moved to Dallas. Got career. I got to see him play against Karl Malone in Dallas in the NCAA tournament. I'm going to start kind of where Earl left off. Phi Slamma Jamma. So that they had to come up with a name because of Michael, I don't remember his last name. He could jam it. They had a whole, and it was a competition between them and Louisville, who were known by the Doctors of Dunk. And you're talking about an era when Patrick Ewing was a star at Georgetown, and Ralph Sampson was a star at Virginia. You had the heyday.
Was Ralph Sampson went to Virginia?
Ralph Sampson, his last year was 83 and 84. They made the Final Four after he graduated. And Rick Carlisle was the team captain at Virginia.
Oh, I
So
thought he went
83,
to. Well, who was
83
the
was the
Sampson
last
that
year
went
of
to
Ralph
Houston?
Sampson.
Who
Uh,
was the Sampson that went to Houston? Wasn't there a Sampson in Houston?
Sampson was Houston. So I'll get to that. But Phi Slamma Jamma, they had to come up with a name because they had a lot of brothers. Even the 6-foot guard would dunk it. The backup guard would dunk it. And they're like, you had Scooter and Rodney McCray at Louisville. And I know Wild Dog appreciate me mentioning them, but in the NCAA tournament in 1983, Houston beat Louisville, and a lot of people call that the national championship game. But there was this little coach called Jim Valvano in NC State who not only beat Virginia, North Carolina, and Duke to get to the NCAA tournament by winning the ACC tournament. They had Lorenzo Charles and Derek Wittenberg and uh, the guy that played Utah, forget his name. Anyhow, 4 of their 5 guys went on to the NBA, but Derek Wittenberg throws up a prayer. People don't remember. Olajuwon blocked several shots in that game, and he 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 goes up to block the shot, but it was short, and that's when Lorenzo Charles grabs it, puts it in, rebound for a dunk for a slam.
Out
They
of the air.
they ran out the clock. If you can go get film on that 1984, I mean, it's like the biggest balloon in the world just got multiple pins punched into it. It's like after they just took Louisville and the Doctors dunk apart, it's like, oh, it was a foregone conclusion that they were going to beat little bitty NC State. And not only did they not beat NC State, but the next year they find themselves in the finals against Georgetown and Patrick Ewing.
Mm.
So that's I hope that's in the 30 for 30, but I it's different when you experience it and you live it and it's part of like your identity. It's kind of like people grow up with songs in the 90s, they can tell you exactly where they were at.
Right.
Uh and you mentioned the Dream Shake was named after him. How many players have and that, I mean, Kareem had the sky hook, but very few players have a actual move named after him. And he changed his spelling of his name from Hakeem to Hakeem. So put an H in front of it. Uh, last thing about his college before I move on to his career, 83, 84. So this was before the first dream team when it's still college athletics. He wasn't second. He wasn't third. He was first team All American. And then you can only do it by, so you're talking about he beat out Patrick Ewing and other centers to be on the first team all NCAA.
Mm.
That's, I mean, nowadays we don't even talk about it, but he played, I think it was 4 years at Houston. Here's some of his career statistics, and Earl touched on them. And thank you, Cerebral Sports, for being one of our sponsors. So shout out to Cerebro and Ryan and the gang. Career stats: 21.8 points a game, 11.1 rebounds a game, 2.5 assists a game. 18 seasons. 18 seasons. And this is back in the 80s and early 90s when you didn't have the kind of athletic trainers you got now and all the medicine and doctors. And he only got traded once. I had to look up to see because I didn't remember Olajuwon getting traded. But he got traded to Toronto in 2001. Yeah. So at the end of his career. 18 seasons. He made 4 trips to the NBA Finals. People forget in 81 and 86, 81 with Ralph Sampson and 86 later, they both was against the Celtics. They lost to the Celtics. So you're talking about the Showtime Lakers. The Rockets got past the Showtime Lakers and the rest of the teams in the West just to get beat by the Celtics. So he made 4 trips to the finals as Earl. He won 2 championships back to back. Not just 2, but back to back. Something even LeBron hasn't beat. LeBron only has back to back. He has more championships, but he only has 1 pair of back to back. 1 championship, they were the 5 seed. People forget this. The only team to not have home court advantage throughout the playoffs. They won their second championship as the 5 seed.
Wasn't Dallas? What seed were they when they won the championship?
They were the 5. Well, they were third. They were the third champ. I think they won 57 games that year because they had been the number 1 seed, number 2, and number 4. I think they were the 3rd seed when they won. Okay. There's been lower seeds like the Knicks and Ewing at number 8 make the finals, but they're the only team that was below 4 that have won a championship. But check this out. 13 times in 18 seasons, 13 times he was in consideration for the MVP.
13 times.
Jeez. 13 times he was in. He won the MVP in 93, 94, as well as the NBA Finals MVP.
And Defensive Player of the Year.
I'll get to that. 12-time All-Star. 12-time All-NBA. 6 of those 12, he was on the first team. So half of the time when he was on the All-NBA team, 6 of them, 6 times he was on the All-NBA first team. This one's for you, Earl. 10 times Defensive Player of the Year in the voting. 10 times. He won it twice. He won Defensive Player of the Year twice. We're talking during, the Dikembe Mutombo, Patrick Ewing. I mean, and the list goes on and on. Defensive Player of the Year twice. Career.
And Gary Payton.
His career shooting percentage. Career shooting percentage. This is all overall field. 51%. Career blocks leader twice in a season. You talk, and this next one, this is really going to surprise you. All time, he's number 1 in blocks. So you can look at Dikembe, Ewing, Jabbar, Wilt, Russell, all of those. He's number 1 in career blocks and career regular season and career plus playoffs. Still number 1. Closest player is Dikembe Mutombo.
No.
Dikembe had 541 less blocks than Olajuwon.
What? That's mind blowing. 541 less?
That's the difference between Dikembe and Olajuwon in the number of blocks. Career earnings. This will blow you. $110 million.
Wow. And I
Different
know a lot of
days.
that money went back to Nigeria to help out for sure. Him and
And
the Kingdom of
he's
Congo.
built not only money back, but he's built hospital wings, water, uh,
Mhm.
a lot of stuff. But when you think of all the great centers in I mean, present day, in the past, I mean, the Kimbe, everybody knows of him. Jabbar, Wilt, Russell, all of them. And he's number one in block shots. And that goes to what Earl was saying is he was just as good offensively as Dirk, but he was not just defensive player of the year. He was the best.
Right.
He was the best
Especially
of the
he
best.
played. You said he played 18 years.
18 years, and 3 of those were I think it was 3 with Toronto.
Wow.
I will say the one stat you did not mention, Boogie Bob, Hakeem was so great in the '84 draft. He was the number one pick that made Michael Jordan slip to 3. And talking to Eddie Sefko, Houston was about to engineer a trade where they could have gotten Hakeem and Jordan in the same draft.
Yeah, so I have some trivia for you. Like I told you, that was during mine. You know who went number 2?
Sam Bowie,
Sam Bowie, and
Portland.
Chicago took. Do you know who went number 4 and who took him?
Sam Perkins,
Sam Perkins with the
the
Dallas
Dallas
Mavericks.
Mavericks. Right.
So at number 4, you can look it up. At number 4, they own Cleveland's first round pick. On the same road trip, they played Chicago and they played Cleveland. They lost to one and beat the other. Team they lost, the team they beat was Chicago. Had you flipped it, the Mavericks would have had the 3rd pick that year with a Rolando Blackman and a Dale Ellis, and they were talking about taking Jordan and trading up from the 4th pick. So that's a history lesson. One victory against Cleveland and a loss against Chicago put them from the 3rd to the 4th pick. They took Perkins. Do you know who was number 5 in that draft?
I do not.
Charles Barkley.
Charles Barkley. And Rick Carlisle was also at the bottom of that draft. John Stockton was in that draft also. That '84 draft
That
was stacked.
84 was still that, and the 2004 draft are 2 of
Yeah,
the best drafts ever.
definitely, definitely.
That's crazy. Olajuwon has a legacy that a lot of people really need to go back and kind of familiar themselves with what he did for the city of Houston. I forgot he did go to Toronto, man, later in his career.
Everyone
So,
does.
right. So our last segment, and we're gonna swing this one back over to you, Earl. Will the Mavericks make the playoffs this year? Because they're right now sitting in the 8th spot, and it's a tough, as you said earlier. Well, the West is some of those teams in the West are hard to beat, and you got to come with A game every time. Do you think the Mavs will fall or stay where they at? And right now they're in the play-in. So if
Right.
they had to stay in the play-in, will they make the playoffs, or how do you think they'll fall for this year?
Yeah, I think they're in a play-in with Sacramento, and De'Aaron Fox got traded to San Antonio. I know that Zach LaVine is now reunited with DeMar DeRozan, and they still have Sabonis in Sacramento. But I think that the Mavericks end up getting in that 7 and 8 seed game, and I'm going to take, if it's Sacramento and Dallas, I'm going to take Dallas. But I
Mm,
also think that Golden State, now that they have Jimmy Butler to go with Steph Curry and Draymond Green, I think they're going to end up getting in that top 8 also. So I think they're in 10 right now. But
yeah,
I would say Dallas and Golden State would be the 7 and 8 seed, I believe. Yes.
because you have right now in the play-in, you have Minnesota, Dallas, Sacramento, and Golden State. So you're saying Minnesota will fall out of that?
Yeah, I
So
think
they'll
so. I I'm not a huge fan of. I like them individually in terms of Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle, but I
Mhm.
think when you see what Karl Anthony Towns is doing with the Knicks right now, I thought that was a
Killing
better
it.
fit for Anthony
The
Edwards
Knicks. Yeah.
than Julius Randle is right now. So I don't see that team doing well uh, when it when the games are actually uh, close to playoff contention and going into the postseason. So I would choose Dallas and Golden State to come out of those four teams there.
So if so, Dallas go to state. So Dallas will stay in the 8th spot, and then
I think they go up to
they'll move up to
seven.
7. Okay, so
They,
they'll be
yeah,
7. And so if they move up to 7, then that means they'll be facing off against Denver in the playoffs. So who will win out of that?
Denver, Denver. And
Yeah.
I
So
think
what if Dallas got all back to full strength? Will it still be Denver?
yes, yes, because I'm going to go with Jokic as the best player, and Anthony Davis has not been able to solve Jokic. And I know he wouldn't be guarding Jokic; it would probably be Gath and Derek Lively.
Hmm.
But I just don't see anyone stopping Jokic in a series. Um, and I think the Lakers are trying to avoid Denver for that very reason because they've been knocked out by Denver what 3 years in a row, I believe. Uh, so I would say if it is 2 versus 7, Denver versus Dallas, I would choose Dallas in that series. But I think uh, I feel like Dallas is going to get into the playoffs. They're going to get into the play-in, and I think that they will end up being the 7th seed.
Yeah, because right now it's so jumbled right now. Minnesota, Dallas, Sacramento, and Golden State. The surprise team to me right now that's not in this conversation is Phoenix. And I don't know what's going on in Phoenix. They got the players to put themselves in a good position, but it's just they haven't gelled.
Not at all. And I thought when they got Tyus Jones that he would be the perfect point guard to kind of delegate everything, but it still hasn't gone that way, you know. And I think we're going to see Kevin Durant get traded this offseason for that reason. I think they wanted to move Bradley Bill, and he has that no trade clause, and he basically said, "I'm not going anywhere. You try to see it." I think they wanted to do a deal with Miami and try to get Jimmy Butler, and basically Bradley Bill nixed that. So I think the only trade chip that you have this offseason is Kevin Durant.
Durant.
So I see them breaking it up and sending Kevin Durant somewhere this summer.
So you think they'll keep Booker more than Kevin Durant?
Oh
Because
yeah,
Booker is younger, but
he's younger.
he hasn't shown me anything yet. As far as he could get the numbers offensively, but I don't see any more from Booker than that.
I think he's the franchise player, um, and I think their ownership is going to treat him like he's the franchise player. Um, and they've spent a lot of money, and they've brought in all stars: Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal to try to pair with uh, with Bradley Devin Booker. But
Mhm.
so he could be available, but I think it's going to end up being Kevin Durant.
Yeah. And I would love to see Kevin Durant wear the Dallas Maverick uniform. That'd be so freaking dope.
I
Nah,
think everyone will love that except for PJ Washington. That's his position.
his position, yeah. Yeah, I would probably move Durant over to small forward then and keep PJ, or maybe move PJ to small forward.
I think
That's true.
Kyrie would love that. I think
Yeah, yeah.
Kyrie would definitely resign if that was the case.
I think that's what they were trying, but it didn't fall through. But I feel you that Dallas, if they, like you said, if they continue where they at now and make it, um, and stay, they'll be the 7th seed and they'll face off against Denver. But as you said, they might as well just stay home because they're gonna lose to Denver.
Right. Now, if they fall to 8, Boogie Bob mentioned this, they do have OKC's number. So that might be a better matchup for them to fall to 8, but they would have to lose the first play-in game and then play a second one, and that would probably be up against Golden State with Steph Curry and uh, and Jimmy Butler. And do you
Hmm.
really want to have a one game winner take all against those guys in the second play in game? So it would be better for them to match up with Denver as the seventh seed. But if they fall to eight, it would be a better matchup for them in the postseason to go against OKC.
Okay, and this is my last question for you. How many games would that series take to win?
For Denver,
Either way.
um, if it's Denver, I think that they could get it done in six, but it could be five.
Mm,
Um, I don't see Dallas winning that series. Not at
mm.
all. Not at all.
Dang.
They,
Not even a hope of a prayer?
I think they could make it competitive like they did with the NBA Finals last year by winning one game just to send it back and Denver win it. Uh, but I don't think that would be a very competitive series. Now, if Dallas plays some type of perimeter defense on Jamal Murray, that might be a series. But if
Because they'll
Jamal
put
Murray,
PJ on Jamal for sure. When you think, and then Max Christie has really been playing very well
Max Christie has
defensively.
been great. He's been awesome. But I would say for 15 to 20 minutes, that might work. But you still have Aaron Gordon. You still have who's the
Michael Porter Jr.
Michael Porter Jr. Yeah, and they've got Russell Westbrook now. Um,
Mm-hmm. I
there's a
forgot
there's a
about
lot
him.
of there's a lot of combinations there. Um, I would still choose Denver in that series.
All right, we're not going to hold it against you.
I
Boogie
could be
Bob,
wrong.
you
I could be wrong.
right. Boogie Bob, your thoughts, man. You think Dallas continue to strive and make the playoffs this year, or will they fall out of the bucket?
Well, I think Earl had my cheat sheet there. Uh, you know, even as a season ticket holder and all, a lot of vitriol, on the trade. The one thing the Mavericks really didn't have and have not had for quite some time, uh, they didn't have a true power forward. They've had Dorian Finney-Smith kind of play that role, a little undersized. They've had PJ Washington, admirably play that role last year, little undersized. Uh, and a proof in the pudding is every time Julius Randle plays against Dallas, he's good for 20 and 10. And Randall's been in the NBA, what, 8, 9, 10 years, something like that. The Lakers had him. We really haven't had a true power forward. Derrick Jones Jr. last year, but I'm talking about somebody that's a legitimate 6'9", 6'10", either athletic or physically strong. They
Mhm.
haven't had that guy. And that's what AD gives you. And you still have Kyrie as a point guard, and then you got Spencer Dinwiddie can come in, Dante Exum. I still don't understand the Grimes. I love Quentin Grimes. I thought he gave me
Right. I'm glad you
somebody
said
who
this.
could
I'm like,
create his own
what?
shot.
What are they doing with that? That was
Caleb
crazy.
Martin. Caleb Martin had a career year once in Miami. Uh, so I mean, of all the trades, the Quentin Grimes trade, just you scratch your head and you go, why'd you trade Tim Hardaway Jr. away? If you didn't want to pay this guy the money. But I I appreciate Earl's perspective at having to win 2 games, but I actually it's going to matter who they play. If the Lakers fall down to uh, 7, or Memphis, who's on a slide, or Houston's on a slide, uh, I actually have, because I think as far as matchups go, it's a dream scenario. Uh, Let me take you back 18 years when the Mavericks won 60, 64, 65 games, and they were the number 1 seed.
Golden State.
Don't mention it.
And
Golden State.
they lost to Golden State very, 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 very late in the season, like 4 or 5 games to go. And
And that's
Avery
what
rest,
allowed them to get in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Avery rested his starters. And that victory got them to 41-41, which allowed them to play the Mavericks. So you had Baron Davis and Jason Richardson and
Captain
just a
Jack.
whole bunch of shooters that were hot as a pancake. I mean,
Mhm.
it was the worst nightmare. I mean, I think the Mavericks would have rather seen the Spurs than, and then we played 2 versus 7 and having both seasons, Spurs having both seasons. They'd rather played the Spurs in the first round than to see the Warriors. And the reason I say that in the regular season home game, the first time Dirk had scored, first or second time, he scored 52 points on 20, 21, 22 shots. 52 points. They had a somewhere around 8 or 9 point lead with 28 seconds to go. They lost the game. They lost the game. Avery fouled them, so they couldn't take a 3-point shot 2 times in a row. Then calls the timeout. They hit the free throws, cuts the lead to where it's 2, and it was about 6 seconds to go. Jason Richards comes down, does reverse spin dribble, heaves a 3-pointer, nothing but net. They lose by 1 on a night that Dirk scores 52 points.
Mm.
That's the same year that the Warriors knocked out the #1 seeded Mavs. So if I'm Oklahoma City, I'm sitting there going, we don't want to see the Mavericks. PJ Washington, he like, oh, I'm going to eat, and they
He's
played
the
already without Luka.
the governor of Oklahoma, the mayor of OKC.
So you know, they got to get healthy for one, but as far as matchups go, if the dream scenario for me would be they get the 8 seed, they play Oklahoma City, they're in Oklahoma City's head. SGA goes off, gets his MVP, and then in the second round he's sitting at home.
Now, Bob, you have to remember Chet didn't play in those games. So OKC is a different team with a healthy Chet Holmgren. So
I,
that
I
might not be the
that is
matchup
true.
that they want.
That is true, and that's assuming all the centers, the Mavs and Chet, were healthy. I think you've got at least 3 options between Lively, Gafford, and Anthony Davis that you could you can at least neutralize Chet Holmgren. Uh, but that's a series where easily you could see SGA averaging 40 points a game and Jalen Williams averaging 25 and no contributions for anybody else. Lou Dort's a great defensive player. They traded Giddey because he couldn't hit a 3-point shot last year. Wallace is a great defensive guy. Caruso is a great defensive guy. So they're built long, but it's just a bad matchup for
Yeah, it's a
OKC.
bad matchup. Yeah.
And uh, the dream scenario is if that's who the Mavericks play, and they get just a whip, just a little bit of whip of uh, momentum, then that can carry them to the Western Conference Finals against Denver. And I think they would lose to Denver, but if they get to if the chips fall where just correctly, and they get that 8 seed, play Oklahoma City, take them out, and then they play the number 4 or 5 seed, could be the Lakers. They get to the Western Conference Finals. People will still dislike Nico, but it will take the sting a little bit. It'll take the sting away just a little bit.
Man, I really think if they do make it to the Western Conference Finals, they're gonna make it back to the championship regardless. Because it's just like you can't
Wow.
just go this far and not push yourself through. And it'll be like you said, it'll be a nod to Nico's genius if that happens. Like, oh yeah, I knew this was gonna happen. So it'll be a dream scenario for Nico for sure. But a lot of things got to fall in place for that to even be a possibility, man.
Well,
But
there are
you
two things
basically,
to consider too.
yeah,
The Mavericks own their own first round pick this year. They got Derek Lively because they own their own pick. So they own their own pick this year. And also, you were talking about Phoenix and trade. Phoenix traded their one and only first round pick. I forget what team it was at Utah, Oklahoma City. They traded their 1 first round pick for 3. 3 first-round picks, which are supposed to be later in the draft, but it's still 3 first-round picks.
Mm-hmm.
You can go shopping with 3 first-round picks, even if they're at the bottom of the first round.
That's a fact.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, think of it. This is the win-win. Okay, they make it. They play overseas. They get the Western Conference. Okay, they don't make it. They're in the lottery. They get lucky and get the number 1 pick, and they get Cooper Flag. Now what do you do?
Yeah, somebody brought up the Tim Duncan year with the Spurs when David Robinson got hurt, and the Spurs got the
Exactly.
number 1 pick and got Tim Duncan. And that could happen now with San Antonio and Wemby. And can you imagine Victor Wembanyama with Cooper Flag in San Antonio next year?
And De'Aaron Fox.
And De'Aaron Fox.
And a boatload of first
And
round draft
Stephon
picks.
Jackson. Yeah. They could be loaded.
That's when you hear the sign, that's the truck backing up the load full of money so they can pay those guys.
Oh man, facts, man. Guys, this actually been one of the most amazing shows I've been a part of thus far. Earl, man, thank you so much for joining us. Bob, you always know I appreciate your commentary and what you add to the show. As we close out, Bob, tell the people where they can find you at on the social media streets, man.
Well, they can find me at Boogie Bob on YouTube, but more importantly, up there above Earl's name, you can find me at Swish for real.
It's for real, man, for sure. Earl, man, thanks again, man, for joining us, man. You know we're gonna have to get you on again because, man, I love the way you just talk about basketball. You know, you bring back memories, especially when you mention Michigan, the Fab Five. That was my squad, Chris Webber. Man, tell the people where they can find you at on the social media streets, and if they need to just kind of send you a shout out, just give me your handles.
Yeah. First of all, thank you guys for having me on again. Anytime you want me on, I'm here. Ed Earl K Sneed, X, Twitter, whatever you call it, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm really easy to find.
No, thanks. Again, I appreciate you guys. It's been an amazing show. And if you want to see me, I'm actually on X, Lampkin McKell. And then you see Poet. That's me. I'm still representing Swish for real. And, I'm a poet too. So we got to make it happen. Guys, it's been an amazing show. We're signing out, man. Give your weekend back, man. Have a great one, man.
Appreciate you guys.
That's it, Pray.